Homeworthy, hi, welcome. I'm Darcie, and I can't wait to show you our home in Rancho Santa Fe.
You're watching Homeworthy, where we believe every home has a story.
Hi, I'm Darcie Bundy. I am a retired interior designer, but still very active doing design with myself and my family as the client. And we are in the entryway of our home in Rancho Santa Fe, Southern California, and very happy to have you with us. So, when my husband and I were moving from Washington, D.C., East Coast, urban, brand new house, contemporary architecture, we knew we wanted something completely different. We wanted a house that was rooted in the history of this place, a house that was authentic, that was really quintessentially Southern Californian. That meant that we needed a Spanish Colonial Revival house. So, what are the key features of this architecture? You've seen some of them in the portico when you entered earlier. Clay roof tiles, stucco exterior, thick interior plaster walls, fireplaces, archways, courtyards, very important, and finally, wood ceilings supported by heavy beams, often ornately carved. And when we walked into this house, we saw all of those features in spades. And we were smitten. We were absolutely smitten. But at the same time, we realized that if we bought this property, we would be in for a major renovation and restoration project because the property was not in good shape when we purchased it. Hard to say whether it was indoors or outdoors, which needed more work. They both needed a ton. It needed an entirely new electrical system. All the bathrooms needed to be renovated, sometimes gut renovated. The largest room in the house had no heating or cooling system, and so on and so on. This house is probably the biggest project we've ever taken on, and that includes houses that we've built from scratch. I think it's often harder to do a massive renovation than it is to build from the ground up. It is the case that this house has seen many lives. The house had kind of fallen on, I would say, tougher times. The prior owner, the person from whom we purchased the house, never moved in and instead loaned it to a rotating cast of professional boxers who lived, differently from the way that we lived and live, and so there was a lot to do in that regard to bring it back. And there are some funny stories that I'm going to tell during the course of the home tour. But I do feel good about restoring this house, which has such intrinsically terrific bones, bringing it back to kind of heyday status. We're in the entryway of our home, and as I've said, we bought this house for its architecture, so we walk through the front door and look up. This is the first thing we see, this magnificent ceiling hand-painted by a California artist. It was a real wow moment, and the very first thing that we saw. Ahead, a fireplace, a modified Kiva-style fireplace, one of 14 fireplaces, both inside and outside the house. We use about a half a dozen of them, and the rest, like this one, we treat as architecture. In addition, in this room, from an architectural point of view, we have a pair of antique doors on either side of the entryway. We have 12 sets of antique doors in this house from Mexico. So architecturally, the entryway is a really good introduction to the house. Now, what about the interiors? So it was very important to me that the entryway be an introduction to the house as a whole with regard to interiors. And we believe that the miracle is in the mix. And by that, I mean we collect from a broad range of cultures, countries, historical timelines. The thing that most of our collection has in common, it's handmade, items are handmade, and most of it has the patina of time. So let's see how we do in this room in terms of the mix of furnishings. I want to start over here with this chest. This chest is English. It dates from about 1820. I bought it shortly after my husband and I were married, and we've been married for 37 years. This is my time to say that in the course of our marriage, we've moved 10 times. We have friends who joke that we're in the witness protection program, but the point is we've moved a lot. Okay, atop the chest, we have a Chinese scholar's box. In this box, he would have kept his quills, his pens, his inks, and his scrolls to make that beautiful Chinese calligraphy that you've all seen. These we bought in Cambodia. These are the bells that the monks ring in the streets as they solicit alms. This really delicate, lovely little box comes from Thailand, and in fact it's contemporary, but it's part of the Thai government's efforts to revitalize traditional crafts in that country. I bought it at the National Handicraft Museum. I was told that it took a person 2 months to make this entirely from scratch. And I just can't tell you how I admire and respect people who have that patience, that perseverance, that passion to engage in this kind of artistry. Just amazing to me. Okay, moving on. The chair is an antique from Venice, nice marquetry, and the seat is upholstered in a fabric remnant. I save all of my fabric and wallpaper remnants, and I always find future uses for those remnants. Actually, it's kind of silly, but it makes me feel secure to have this collection of go-to remnants. Over here we have one of my favorite pieces, this is an antique textile from China. It was made for the Chinese imperial family. How do we know that? Because this color, which happens to be one of my favorite colors, was reserved for the use of the Chinese imperial family. And in addition, only the Chinese imperial family could have the 8-clawed dragon on their accessories and artifacts. I just love stories like this. And by way of context, the last emperor of China abdicated in 1912. So this probably, is from the turn of the 1900s. You'll see more dragons in the house, but this is the only 8-clawed dragon you'll see. Over here, again, my favorite color. I believe these to be Italian, possibly Spanish, definitely handmade with some years on them. I needed two things to fill and round out these corners, and I do like this color as against the stain that we put on the saltillo tile floors. We really darkened these floors in the interior to kind of relate to the ceiling line here. The carpet is from the Middle East. It's vintage, all hand knotted, hand wool, beautiful design. I've had it in the last 5 of our homes. The durability is fantastic with these beautiful handmade, handcrafted things. This has a great story. This is an antique from Morocco inlaid with mother of pearl. A Moroccan gentleman told me that this has a very specific purpose in a Moroccan household. When the man of the house comes home for lunch or at the end of the day, he takes off his fez and he puts it right here, where it remains until he leaves the house again. Again, one of those stories that I really like. And as I mentioned earlier, Rancho Santa Fe, from its outset, was very horsey, and it's still very horsey today. And I'd like to introduce you to our horse, because we do have a horse. This is Dieguito. Dieguito is my kind of a horse because you don't have to muck out his stall and you don't have to feed him. You just dust him once a week. I believe that Dieguito is an antique from Mexico, although certain people have looked at him and thought he might be Moroccan. Hand-carved, solid wood, weighs a ton. Remnants of paint on his saddle and on his bridle wreath. That's one of the ways you know that he's got some years on him. But having Dieguito here in the entryway in our Spanish Colonial Revival house in Rancho Santa Fe is my wink and a nod to the history of this community. And now we're going into a room which was the ugliest room in the house when we bought it. We are in a room that we call the lounge, and by lounge we mean a place where you'd have a cup of tea on a rainy afternoon and a gossip with a girlfriend, where I read my shelter magazines or pull up the latest Homeworthy. By lounge, we do not mean a cocktail lounge or a pool hall, and that was what was here when we bought the house. I know you'd like to see before pictures, but we don't have any. There was such a massive amount of work to do on this property that my husband and I just dove right in. We were so anxious to get to the after that we didn't document the before. But let me just say, a huge bar on this wall, dark wood, stained, dinged, stainless steel sink. This was the pool table. In back of the pool table, high top tables like you'd see at Buster's or any of your neighborhood bar. If that wasn't clear enough, a big sign on this wall that said bar and gold lame swags above the beams in this ceiling. In the corner, a hobby horse, the kind that you used to see outside of supermarkets. You put a quarter in and your kids get to go back and forth like this. And finally, on this wall, the biggest and most ornate fireplace. It looked like it belonged in a Bavarian castle. So the demolition guys came in. We demolished the bar. We demolished the fireplace. We gave everything else away. Alas, no one would take the swags. It was one of the only things that we had to toss rather than find a new home for. And then we started to build back. We started with a fireplace because we had a big hole in the wall. Because we have so many fireplaces in this house and they are all otherwise original to the house and or traditional, we felt we had the space to have at least one more contemporary, clean-lined fireplace. And I love stone. I particularly like stone that is massively veined. This is called Santa Luz quartzite. It is the most heavily veined stone that I could find. We then hired a terrific stonemason originally from Mexico, and over a period of months, he measured, cut, and made perfectly book-matched fireplace. There's not a single day that I don't find joy in this fireplace, and I do use this room every day. Okay, then what about the furnishings? I'm going to start with the sofas. We did not buy much new furniture for this house, despite the fact that it's a whole lot bigger than any house we've ever had before. Exception, these sofas. And I mention them because I bought them through the loyalty program at CB2, essentially getting two for the price of one. I mention that because if saving money is a priority for some of the viewers, I'd really encourage you to investigate the loyalty programs. You can definitely save a lot of money. The loyalty programs for the big furniture retailers, they all have them. The table is a classic. It's by Baker. I've owned it for 30 years, waterfall style, made of bamboo, will never go out of fashion. I'd like to turn to something quite different. So we've got this classic table. We've got this lovely, handsome new stone fireplace. By the way, this wall, I painted this color to make the Santa Luz quartzite really pop. This color is fondly called by designers pond scum green. And it's also one of my favorites. You'll see it throughout the house because, again, I believe that repeating colors from room to room helps with the fluidity of a place. Okay, switching gears in terms of the mix. A lot of the viewers will look at this and they'll know that it is from an Indian pueblo and that it's very, very old. Again, appropriate to have something from a pueblo in this house in Rancho Santa Fe. What you may not know is that it was originally functioning as a ladder. I love the rusticity of this piece, and again, its pertinence or appropriateness to this house is important to me. Moving on, this painting. This painting is by a Korean-born, now Korean-American artist named Jung Her. It's perhaps my favorite painting in our collection. I love how explosive it is, how powerful. It evokes a strong emotion in me. I tend to like paintings with a lot of black in them, and I like paintings of cosmological content. I like paintings of portals, of windows and doors, and you'll see several examples. Again, if the miracle's in the mix, this is quite different from a Zheng He painting. We were recently in San Miguel de Allende, which is in the Guanajuato province of central Mexico. This textile sculpture is by an indigenous people in Guanajuato province. Again, appropriate to have an artifact made by an indigenous people in this house at this time in Rancho Santa Fe. But again, quite different next to it. This is a French antique. I mean, very different from indigenous people in Guanajuato province. I've had it for 25 years or so. It's got Fortuny fabric on it that's all faded, but I wouldn't change it for the world. Here, we have a tree stump table with an epoxy top, a lovely shiny epoxy top made by an artisan in Costa Rica. And this is one of my favorite pieces in the entire house. This is a Spanish colonial bench, probably from Mexico, possibly from old New Mexico. It definitely has many years on it. And I love it underneath this massive mirror, which needed something to ground it, but this is something that belongs in this house. Feel very lucky to have it. Just a couple more items here. The Buddha and his 5 monks. Okay, you know this is the Buddha because the Buddha is the one with the top knot. The top knot represents the Buddha's enlightenment. Now, in life, and the Buddha lived in the 5th century BC, in life he was followed by 500 monks. So we have 5 monks here, each of them standing for 100 monks to get the grand total. The Buddha here is making one of the hand signals. They are called the mudras. This is one of the most basic ones, and it's conferring a blessing, benevolence, and reassurance. And I don't know about all of you, but I need all of that in my life. I should say that we found these in Cambodia and exported them to the United States. And I want to emphasize with all the proper legal documentation because that's very important. A couple of the smalls in here. The baskets are all from Africa. These small tables are antiques from India. These sculptures, statues, are also from Africa, from Zimbabwe. Beautiful, beautiful stone. I didn't mention the carpet. This is also from India, hand knotted, incredibly durable, 100% wool. We collect coral and minerals. You see coral and minerals here. The paintings are from a gallery in Maine, again with my favorite greens and butterscotch. I didn't mention the photograph. It's by a fine arts photographer who was doing a series on climate change. What I like about this photograph is how enigmatic it is. By that I mean, are we looking, where is the horizon? What is the water, where does the water differentiate from the sky? Are we looking at smoke or are we looking at clouds or both? Anyway, and I think the scale of that photograph above the fireplace is great. And finally, I would just say, look up. The chandelier is from Venice. It is a Fortuny hand-painted silk, a gift from my husband. This, too, is a classic that will never go out of fashion, a real designer's favorite. So in this room, we have things from Mexico, India, Cambodia, Thailand, Costa Rica, France, and yet all of these pieces, I feel, can breathe. They can have a conversation with one another, and I hope you feel that too, but they can breathe, and that's important to me. It's not cluttered, despite the fact that it's richly designed. Okay, next up is the powder room. This was a wow moment when we walked into the house, and I want to be sure to say that I can't take credit for this powder room. The refined taste of a prior owner gets that credit. Come on in. Venetian, plaster, walls in my favorite color, green, antiqued mirrored panels that a prior owner had installed here, and then she hired an artist to hand paint and etch all of the succulents and palm trees that you see all over our property, but indeed all over Rancho Santa Fe. When I saw these panels, I can't tell you, I just went crazy. I believe that they are truly one of a kind. They were custom made just for this space. So I'm very excited about that. The only things that we did in here, we used remnants of the Santa Luz quartzite from the lounge fireplace to put a new top on the vanity. We brought in a new nice hand-hammered sink. And then up above, I felt we needed a more contemporary, clean-lined light from what was there. And this was made by a Maine-based artist named Sarah Bouchard. It's, again, reminiscent of a glowing globe or a moon. And that's all I needed to say, but those panels knocked me out. Our goal in homes, in all of our homes, has always been to create a space that is calm, that is clean-lined and collected. By calm, I mean, you know, the world's kind of a stormy place. I believe our home should be a shelter in the storm. I mean that seriously. I want my head to clear when I walk into my house. I want my pulse rate to go down. So a calm space is important. Clean-lined, meaning uncluttered, where the empty space is as important as the filled space. I want our home to look and feel intentional, but never contrived, and definitely not pretentious. It's important to me that you walk into our home and it makes sense to you. It just, you say, I get this house, I get it. And by collected, I mean personal. I mean, we live with what we love, and we bring it with us wherever we go. Those are our collections that I'm really looking forward to sharing with you today. It is a large house. The joke in our family is that Darcie likes to roam in the evening. I do find it a place where not only can I relax with my family and loved ones and friends, but that I can take a certain pride in. I mean, I feel like we turned around a property with incredibly great bones that was in bad shape, and we take, to be honest, a kind of quiet sense of pride in that. I feel most delighted when people tell me that they feel comfortable, but also intrigued by this home. People, I think, are naturally curious, and they see things that come from all over the world in this house, and they ask questions about them. And I love telling the stories of the things that we've collected over time. Lots of times we buy things and we don't yet know what those stories are, and really the fun is in researching the objects that you purchase, learning about them. That's the way you learn about the other cultures that these come from. And honestly, I see it as a show of respect for people whose names I'll never know. I mean, people who lived hundreds of years ago in many instances, but it's a sign of respect when you go and you research what these people have made by their own hand. So we're entering now the primary bedroom, and I don't plan to really linger here. Primarily, I want to make the point that nothing in this room is new, purchased new for this house, with the exception of the raw silk curtains on the window. Everything in this room was otherwise in primary homes, and I want to emphasize that because I always get the question or the comment, oh, Darcie, you know, everything looks so thought out, and it looks so intentional, and the scale is good. Did you start afresh? Did you just do everything new for this house? And the answer is like, no. 90% of the furniture in this house has come with us from home to home to home, literally over a 30-year period. So that is my message in this primary bedroom. Now, there are a few things that I'd like to point out to you, but as I said, we won't linger in this room. First of all, from an architectural point of view, you've got this beautiful terrace that looks out over the pool. Maybe later on we'll go out these doors and look out over the pool, but a great place to have a cup of coffee in the morning or a drink in the evening. We do have a collection of antique textiles in this room. This piece, made in the Uyghur section of China, the Muslim community there. Incredible embroidery. Again, that just knocks my socks off. This textile, made by a pilgrim going on the Hajj to Mecca from Indonesia. Very detailed work. And when he or she would bring this back to Indonesia after the Hajj, it would be a blessed item. This is the only reclining Buddha in our collection. Here's more dragons that we had made into lamps, but you see these dragons only have 4 claws, not 8, not an imperial dragon. Okay, finally I would say in this room, this bench was made in the period of the British Raj in India. I was told when I bought it 25 or 30 years ago that this was the original caning, which is quite amazing to me given its age. And this has sat in front of our bed in house after house. So the big message in this room is, no, we don't start over again every time we move. We buy what we love and we take care of it, and with any luck, we'll love it for a lifetime, and it will be something that perhaps our children, even if our grandchildren, will love. And I would pass that news on to anyone who's willing to listen. We're going into my bathroom. I have to say this is one of my favorite rooms in the house. I'm very lucky that I have my own bathroom. It's only the second time in our marriage where he's got a bathroom and I do. I wanted a really moody bathroom, and that's not what we found here. The bathroom was not in good shape. This was a gut renovation. And I'll work our way around the room in explaining what damage we did before we rebuilt. So this was more or less a solid wall with a small opening. The shower was here, but it was cramped and so forth. So we blasted the wall out, did all new plumbing, et cetera, et cetera. Had the glass walls brought in, custom made. They were custom made throughout the house for all of the bathrooms. And then we started with the tile. I love tile. So I particularly like penny tile. Again, I feel it never goes out of style. You can get it in every single color. So we have penny tile on the floor, on the walls, and then the back wall is a contrast tile. So opened up, big new shower. Rounding the corner here, we destroyed the existing vanity. This one was made on site, but it's perfectly plain and straightforward. But what is nice is, once again, we got to use the leftover stone from the lounge fireplace. I really like cost-effective solutions. So this is more Sandalwood quartz on the wall, on this, and this side waterfall. Now these art sconces, I saw these first on the internet and I love them. And most people seem to like them when they walk in, because I do show people my bathroom all the time because I'm so fond of my moody bathroom. I did have one friend, however, who took a look at them and said, you know, Darcie, you don't think that looks a little bit like they belong in a bordello, do you? And I went, no, I don't think that at all. I didn't hear that. I actually love the glow that they cast on the Sandalwood quartzite. Again, my version of pond scum green, this moody bathroom. You can see we've got the fireplace on. What was here when we found the place was an enormous built-in jacuzzi tub that came and butted right up against the fireplace. Not only did the jets not work, the faucet didn't work. So the bathtub took up all of this space and it was completely unfunctional. So we boosted that and put in a freestanding tub. A couple of quick comments. Handmade in Morocco by currently present-day artisans are still making these beautiful tassels. This is another use of remnants. So I had some leftover tile. And I'm looking at this windowsill and I'm thinking it was very bland. So I brought this leftover tile, which is pretty much this color, except it has this sheen. I asked our tile guy to go ahead and tile this, this windowsill, and we did the same frame that we used around the shower. And I liked this so much, I did again elsewhere in the house. So again, a use of remnants. Another Fortuny, hand-painted silk. As I said, never goes out of style. It's a real pleasure to be in the bathtub and look at that at night. Just a couple things and we'll be on our way. The chair is one of a pair, an antique from Morocco. And finally, my last remnant story. You have this big, long wall. As a designer, you have to do something with this wall. It needed to be simple, and I thought, I have a remnant. This wallpaper is of palm trees, and not just any palm tree, it's the exact palm tree that we have 18 of surrounding our swimming pool, and that there are another 18 or so outside the window above the courtyard here. So I asked our my fine carpenter to make frames for me, and then we just wallpaper pasted this wallpaper to it, and all of a sudden your need for art is addressed on this wall in a very low-cost solution. Again, I would do this again. Why didn't I not just paper the whole wall? Well, number one, these are plaster walls. You can't really do that. And number two, it would have been much more expensive than this solution, which basically took 2 days to effect. So kind of pleased with that, and keeper idea. I want to do that again. And that's it for my moody bathroom. I hope viewers like it half so much as I do. Okay, now we were on the eastern side of the house. We're now going into the center of the house, and then next up would be to the western side. So I'll talk about this hallway in a second, but I want to bring you first into the library. A lot of people would call this the office, but my husband and I are retired. We don't ever even say the word office out loud. Library sounds much more calm and serene. This room was planned around the painting here. I'd like to show that to you. This painting is by Elizabeth Stockton. It is of a low country South Carolina salt marsh, but in truth, all salt marshes look pretty much alike. I love this blue with this green again. The green picks up the seagrass of the marsh. And then we go to my trusty curtains that I've taken from the last 5 houses. 5 times I've used these curtains, and I think these curtains look super with this wall and super with this seagrass. So those curtains are an old favorite. This is an antique from England. It dates from about 1800. It's corner cabinet. Other homes, it's been a china closet. It was a bar in one home. Now it houses all of my family photographs, which desperately need to be edited, so I'm not opening that for you. This is another item that looks good wherever you put it. It's from the Art Deco period. It was sourced at the Marché aux Puces, the famous Parisian flea market that designers just love. In a prior house, it was on a dark blue wall. As long as you have it on a wall that is saturated with color, it looks just great, casts a pretty shadow. Let me just take a moment as an aside to say that my plan for the house was, in terms of paint, all of the main social or quote-unquote public rooms are the same color. Sherwin-Williams Greek Villa, which is a chalky white, which is appropriate for plaster, which is inherently chalky in appearance and appeal. But then in the more private or smaller spaces, we have saturated color, the bedrooms, the bathrooms, and a small room like this library. So once again, I got to use my green. This is an American antique. This is a painting that came from my brother's art gallery in Kennebunkport. He's a retired art dealer. Again, you see the moons, the horizons, the themes that appeal to me again and again and again. The colors are actually very similar to the wall itself, except these have a sheen to it. This is metallic paint, so I like the matte paint and the metallic painting. next to it. This is a funny story. So there was a great big built-in here, and it was really officey, that word we don't say, with file cabinets and so forth. So we had this fellow come in, and he blasted all of that out. And in doing so, he went through the back wall. And he was looking in the back wall, the hole he made, and he pulls out a crisp $100 bill with the band marks still visible around it, suggesting that it was part of a stack of $100 bills. And he's telling me this story, and I'm looking at the hole in the wall, and I said, I'm going to go get a flashlight because we need to find the rest of those $100 bills to help pay for this renovation. Well, we never found any more $100 bills, but it's a good story. Free-floating bookshelves, which are modern, clean-lined, uncluttered. In one of our recent moves, we gave away most of our library and only kept the books that were most meaningful to us. And I will tell you this, if you've never done a bookcase, designed a bookcase, it is so fun. I really recommend it. Ditto with tablescaping. It's really fun to put together a bookcase that looks intentional. An antique from India, originally a door. Beautiful hand-carved wood and raised brass here. So very happy to have this as, and I will call it a desk, but it could be a dining table in another iteration. Antique from India, fire screen from France. Again, my color here. It's kind of dinged and dented, but over here in the corner you can't see those dinged and dents. And finally, a painting by Dennis Sheehan, who is a Maine artist known primarily for his snow scenes. And growing up in Connecticut in the countryside, I can remember looking out of my window when I was a kid, looking at the woods as the sun was setting after it had snowed, and just feeling the chill and the damp. And that's the kind of memory that this painting evokes in me. And in addition, I think we should have at least one snow painting in our house in Southern California. Seems right. And finally, as we leave the library and go into the hallway, I do want to just tell you again about these incredible doors. So we're lucky to have so many of them in the house. Look at this original lock. I mean, just incredible, just so amazing to me, and there's still more to come. Okay, so that's it for the library, not the office, the library. And now we'll go out into the hallway, which is the central axis of this house, the center of the house here. First, I'd like to say a couple things about the architecture in this hallway. The arch windows that I talked about are so typical of Spanish Colonial Revival architecture. And look at the depth of these plaster walls, how thick the plaster walls are. You look up, and you have this handsome beamed ceiling, hand-carved beams. Okay, so you've got a hallway here that's 45 feet long and at its widest point, 7 feet. You need to decorate this or else bring a bowling ball, because otherwise it looks like a bowling alley if you didn't have anything in it. So we have this long wall here, again, 45 feet. And lucky us, we have this collection of antique botanicals purchased in Maine about 25 years ago. So the entire wall is this set of antique botanicals, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, and 1. Very happy that we had these botanicals. I wasn't going to mention this, but here we go. This is actually one of my paintings, and very, very few of my paintings make the cut. But this is one that I have always liked. Again, horizon, sea, where are the clouds ending, where are the waves, and so forth. So that's one of mine. Very, very few of them make the cut. Then you come here to the Chinese altar table, and you start to see a part of our collection of antique and vintage ceramics. These and these are either from Greece and Turkey. Ditto these, and these. This to me, however, looks more Spanish. So I'm guessing Spain. This is a contemporary piece from North Carolina, and this is part of a collection that you'll see in the family room shortly. So we're done with the hallway, except to say, look at my beautiful antique French pitchfork, which I treat as sculpture. There's another one elsewhere in the house as well. Next, we have a quick stop in the dining room, which is a surprisingly intimate room for a house of this size. I've lived professionally a right brain, left brain life. I mean, I started out in corporate America. I started out on Wall Street and then worked for one of the biggest companies in the world, that being Exxon, now ExxonMobil, as a Middle East specialist. Traveled a great deal, as did my husband. My husband worked for the same company, so we were colleagues. But many years ago, I made the decision to leave that world for a more creative life, and also because, to be honest, it felt like our daughter was being raised by the nanny, and I wanted more time with her when she was entering her then teenage years. That was a while ago now. And then, as a result, I kind of fell into the interior design business because people were always asking me for advice. Friends would ask if I would help them in their homes, and I thought, well, maybe there's a business here, and it turned out that there was. I enjoyed working with clients, and especially young ones. I loved being given a budget, a really tight budget from a young person who was trying to have a cool and hip place, and seeing if we couldn't do just that for them on a budget. So yeah, that was the creative side. And since then, we've built some luxury spec homes, sold them furnished, and at that point, you're your own boss, and that's kind of fun. So that's kind of the story of my professional life. Retired now, though. Okay, this is the dining room. As I said, it's a surprisingly intimate space for a house this size. But that was okay with me when we bought the house, because the only people we knew in greater San Diego were our daughter, son-in-law, grandkids, and our lovely realtor. I really didn't anticipate dinner parties for 12 or 16. Start with the architecture here. Beautiful ceiling of chevron wood like we saw in the portico. Beams, hand-carved, and then every other beam is hand-painted by a California artist on this beam as well that is in the niche. Another big Kiva fireplace that we fill with candles when we have dinner in this room. We purposely refinished this Saltillo tile floor in a lighter version than the Saltillo tile floor in the hallways to demarcate the rooms. And then in terms of furnishings, we have a dining table for 6 that I actually designed and had made by artisans in Maine. The base is an octagon, which you can't really see with the chairs. I have a thing for octagons, but why an octagonal dining base? Because our first home in Washington, D.C. had an octagonal dining room, and I thought it would be cool to have an octagonal dining table. The chairs have been with us for about 35 years. This is only the second time that they've ever been reupholstered. The painting I purchased in a small shop in Virginia. The proprietor told me that he acquired it from the estate of a wealthy Washingtonian woman who collected local artists, local talent. I did some research. It turns out the only indigenous school of Washington, D.C. painting was called the Color Field School, and this painting is an example of that. I don't know the artist's name. I have further research to do, but once again, this looks like space to me. It looks like cosmology, and I love these colors together. This is painting up to this level of the wall in a room with this very high ceiling height. Is a very typical feature of a Spanish Colonial Revival house, although you also see it in old houses in Italy and Spain. The sculpture is by a Baltimore sculptress bought in Maine. The chairs are antique from Italy. If you had a big dining table, they could be the heads of table chairs. Out here, we have a terrace, and you get a nice peek at our pool and our back garden. This is a really lovely place to have a glass of wine in the evening before dinner and enjoy the sunset. And this is where the hot air balloons, they fly over the house all the time when the weather's good. And so you can sit here and watch the hot air balloons go right on by. Finally, just a couple things. The cross is Ethiopian. It's a Coptic cross. The mirror, kind of one of my favorite pieces, is made, we brought back from the Atlas Mountains of Morocco. It's made by the Berber people. Now, the Berbers are not Arabs. They don't speak Arabic. They speak Berber. And they are known for their craftsmanship, of which I think this mirror is a terrific example. The dark part is leather. It's now as hard as wood. This is all silver, inlaid with red coral and a little bit of turquoise. I appreciate the curved shapes on top in this room, especially with the curves of the Kiva fireplace. And finally, in this room, got to show you these doors. Again, with their original hardware, this is how these doors lock traditionally. Next up, the family room. Check out the arch first. Beam ceiling, skylights, nice clean lined shelving, very uncluttered in appearance. Here we've got our collection of vintage green pottery. Again, I think this one is probably Spanish, but we did all new lighting in this space. But I will tell you that this is an addition to the house, put on, as best we know, around the year 2008. So not a lot of renovation required. So this is an interiors discussion for us. So what do we have going in this room? Chinese demi-lune table, nice, and the paint is kind of scraping off and so forth. I like it. Moroccan selenite. The mirror is a funny story. About 35 years ago, we were in a hardware store in New Jersey, an old-fashioned hardware store, and this was hanging on the wall, and it looked kind of out of place, to say the least. And I said to the older gentleman, who obviously owned the place, tell me about the mirror on the wall. Why is it here? And they said, well, that's a good story. 6 or 7 years ago, somebody brought it in for some repair work, and they never came back for it. And I said, well, that's interesting. Would you like to sell it? And they said, yeah, we'd like to sell it. And so they named a price, and I bought it. And my message to you is keep your eyes open, because you can find beautiful and interesting things sometimes in odd places. Another Buddha. This one is from Burma originally. And he is making a different hand signal, but also a piece that we bought back from Burma. The table is vintage from Morocco. This is an antique. The pot, a nice big one from Spain or possibly Greece and Turkey. Over here, another octagonal table. I like this table a lot. We recently refinished it because you have plenty of room to put your drinks down on it, but you also have room to tablescape it. And as I was saying in the library before, tablescaping and doing bookcases, so much fun, really, really relaxing. Couple cool things here. For a while, I bought every large clamshell I could find, and I would sell them to clients. I did keep a few for myself. And this Buddha is really, really special. It's the oldest one we have. He dates from between the 13th and 15th century. And here you see that on the top of his top knot, he has a flame. And the flame represents peak enlightenment, not just mere enlightenment, but peak enlightenment. Okay, moving over here to the fireplace wall. This fireplace, I think, is quite handsome. This is real stone, not stone veneer. I think I like its simplicity, and this is a fireplace that we use all the time in the cooler months. This is where we start our day with coffee and the newspapers. Over here, a pot from Oaxaca, Mexico, again appropriate to this house, Spanish Colonial Revival. Painting is by an artist from St. Louis. Again, to me, it looks like a window, a portal, which is immensely pleasing to me. Funny story about this. I'll bet nobody knows what this is, because I sure didn't when I first started to look at it in an antique store in Maine. It is an antique weather vane. So we have another one over on the other side of the room. This little fellow, you got to get a picture of him, particularly his devilish face. This comes out of a garden in Maine. It's old. And when our daughter was a little girl, she was frightened of him. She found his face scary. So I always keep him by a fireplace, but I've never forgotten the story of how our daughter was afraid of him. One of our best pieces of furniture, French, early 1800s, owned by a military family, almost certainly. This is a military medal. Perhaps he was a war hero or a military general or leader, but this is French and one of our most important pieces of furniture. Finishing up in here, I'll just say this painting is actually all done in graphite or pencil. The artist's last name is Auslander. She is now a very elderly woman living in Maine and still doing her art. But she did this painting over a 3-year period, 82 to 85. That intrigues me, how you would come back to something, over a period of years until you were satisfied that you had it just right. And again, very, very much cosmological from my perspective. And then finally, we're about to go into the kitchen, but just before we do, I would like to tell you that this table has been in my father's family for generations. It's one of a pair. My brother, who is my only sibling, has the other one. So normally we use everything that we have. I normally don't put protective glass on anything because, as I say, we believe in living with what you love, really living with it. But because it comes from my father's family, I do protect this one, the weather vane. And again, another Buddha from the same source in Burma or Myanmar with the peak enlightenment. That brings us to the kitchen. And the kitchen was renovated by a prior owner, and I think very successfully and very lucky for us because, as you know, kitchen renovations are really expensive. The cabinetry was all made custom on site, and I think he was a master. He was an absolute master. You just see the workmanship here. We use this as a bar, but it could be a breakfast niche as well, or it could be both. But these old stencils are now, kind of faded, and I really like that look. The 8-sided star is a symbol that goes back to ancient Babylonia. So it is actually prehistorical symbol that is used by cultures all over the world, all Islamic culture, Judaic culture, American Indian culture, etc. And it always has a positive connotation symbologically. It means benevolence, universality, knowledge, the wisdom that we all share no matter how rich or how poor we are. So the 8-sided star is a good symbol to have in your house at large, not just in your kitchen. In this corner, we have another Kiva fireplace. We have some interesting pottery, but the pottery of real consequence is here on this table. These are Native American. I originally thought they might be very, very old. Now I'm not so sure. Some of the research I've done more recently suggests they may be just around 75 years old. This pot, I was so sure was Neolithic. If it is Neolithic, that would make it 2,500 to 3,000 years old. Now based on some of my more recent research, I'm not positive, so I don't want to make that claim. It is possible that rather than being Neolithic and having been unearthed from China, that it is something from this hemisphere. The reason I thought it was Chinese Neolithic is that I've been looking very closely at an important collection of Neolithic pottery from China, modern-day China, recently, and this looks exactly like it. But I don't want to make a claim that I'm not reasonably positive of. Okay, just a couple of other things in the kitchen here, because as I say, this was renovated by a prior owner. There's a liege tile in my favorite color in back of the stove. And here, I talked about lemons and avocados. This is the history of Rancho Santa Fe. We have 2 lemon groves on this property, and we have avocado trees. I struggle to give away all of the lemons, and I never come close. Everybody who comes here, and I'm sure I'm going to give it to our videographer today, I'm going to say, please, won't you please take some lemons and some avocados? Okay, we've got skylights up above, which do provide very nice light, and that's kind of it with our kitchen. As I said, we got lucky in here. That did not take a lot of work for me. I want to explain the history of Rancho Santa Fe very briefly, because that history directly tells you how and why we came to choose this house as our new home. It begins with a story of an indigenous people. The Camille Indians were here for thousands of years before the Spanish arrived in 1540. Spain came here as part of its really huge exploratory incursion into the then New World and to build a colonial empire. Turns out Spain was really great at building a colonial empire, and at its peak, that empire included all of California, most of the American West and Southwest, Mexico, and Central America. Spain specifically ruled this area, the area that becomes Rancho Santa Fe, as a Spanish pueblo. And their presence remained here for about 275 years. So long period. Now, specifically in 1821, Mexico fought a war of independence with Spain and succeeded in gaining their independence. And at that point in 1821, Mexico takes control of California. In 1840, the Mexican governor of California gave to the Mexican mayor of San Diego a land grant of 9,000 acres north of the city. And that land grant is the core of what becomes the community of Rancho Santa Fe, where we are today. Now, Mexico did not get to keep California for very long, because in 1850, California becomes the 31st state of the United States of America. Fast forward to 1906, and the Santa Fe Railroad arrives here. Why do they come? They come for wood. They need vast quantities of wood for railroad ties for their nationwide expansion. And they think that the eucalyptus tree, which is native to this area, is the answer to their needs. So they proceed to plant 3.5 million eucalyptus trees on the acreage of the former Mexican land grant. That is to say, right here in Rancho Santa Fe. A couple years later, the young trees are ready to harvest and mill into railroad ties to see how they perform, and the answer is disaster. Turns out eucalyptus wood is not hard enough, unless it's very mature, to withstand the pounding of the iron spikes into the railroad ties. It shatters. So the Santa Fe Railroad's in big trouble, financial debacle. They decide to pivot, and they come up with the idea of a land development company with the intention of eventually selling off huge parcels of this land to so-called gentlemen farmers who will have lemon groves and avocado trees and horses. By their early 1920s, they're really serious about this idea. In 1922, they changed the name of this area to Rancho Santa Fe from the old Mexican name, Rancho San Dieguito. You know, if you own it, you get to name it after yourself. So anyway, at the same time, they hire an elite architectural team headed by a woman named Lillian Rice, and they charge that team with building a village core for the emerging community. And at this juncture, they make two commitments to this emerging community. First, to maintain the rural character of Rancho Santa Fe, and the second commitment is to a singular architectural style, Spanish Colonial Revival architecture, of which this house, our house, is a really good example. Okay, we're coming into a room that we call the Moroccan room, and I'll explain that later. This room was total renovation. When we bought the house, and it's the largest room in the house, when we bought the house, it had neither a heating nor a cooling system. So that's where we needed to start. We moved in on Halloween of 2022, and this room was 10 degrees colder than the rest of the house. So we started in terms of the renovation with tons of insulation in the walls. Then we researched and found a state-of-the-art Unico heating and cooling system, which works great, but it was a big effort to get it into place. Then in terms of renovation, we had to redo the tile work here. Now the tile work, all the blue, all the way around, is proper Zalige Moroccan tile. However, it was scratched and dinged and so forth. We found a specialist who restores old tile, and he did great work over a period of a couple of weeks. The floors needed to be refinished, and we purposely refinished them in two different stains. So because the room is so large, we almost made this look like that this was the floor and that this was an under rug. It's slightly different color. We then painted the ceilings. Of course, we did all lighting up above, as we did in the entire house, and so on. This room was originally a pool house, I'm told, by people who have lived in the neighborhood a long time. It was an open-air pool house that was enclosed, but never heated or cooled, whatever. Now it's a proper living room. This is where we gather with larger groups of people. Although I must say I enjoy sitting right over there at the end of the day and having a glass of wine and reading. This room has great views of all of the gardens on the property as well. Very, very great views. So what do we do in terms of the interiors? Okay, I'll start with this. This pot dates from the time of Christ. It was brought up from underneath the water offshore Capri in Italy in the 1960s, and we bought it from an antiquarian in Washington, D.C. We faced a little bit of a design challenge with the asymmetry of this fireplace. So you can see that this is about twice the size of this. So I tried to decide if that bothered me, but what the solution I came up with was to purposely make the lighting, which again is all new, asymmetrical. So clearly these came from the same collection of lights, but we have the three on this side where this is more substantial and just the singular one on this side. The pots are Moroccan, dating from the 1800s. These two pots, I brought them back from Morocco very carefully on an airplane. These pots, on the other hand, are over 1,000 years old, and they were originally unearthed in Nuristan, which is part of modern-day Iran. And I bought those as a graduate student, even before I was married, when I was really pinching pennies, but I saved up my pennies for those pots. Some of the furniture in place in the room, the blue chairs, swivel chairs, which are so comfortable, and the blue sofa are from RH, and they were in 2 or 3 of our prior homes. Again, even in this big room, there's not that much that's new. Over here, this sectional sofa, I have a comment I want to make. This I designed and had custom made for a specific spot in our first home in Washington, D.C. And I never have trouble placing our furniture when we move from home to home, with the sometimes exception of a piece that is custom designed for a specific space. So in this great big house of ours, I really got lucky, because this is the only space right here where this sectional fits comfortably. And even though I took all the measurements ahead of time, you have to see it in place to know if it's going to work. So I got lucky here because this was the only place for it. This is kind of a fun, interesting story. So I mentioned that we gave away almost everything that we found in this house. It was lightly furnished when we purchased it. This was in the house, but it was an ugly old brown piece of furniture, both inside and out. And I was about to give it away when I realized that I needed something here to ground this painting. And so I realized that this was the exact size that I needed, that the scale was right. So I asked our painters to spray paint it blue to look good with the tiles and do the interiors orange. And then I put our collection of coral in there. And now I kind of like it. Now I'm glad I didn't give it away. Okay, up above, the painting is by Jung He, again, the same man who did the Black Dahlia explosive painting in the lounge that I said was my favorite painting. And I always knew I was going to put that here. Now, Jung He told me, because we've met with Jung He, we've had very pleasant conversations with him, he told me that this painting was inspired by antique Chinese blue and white plates. And when he told me that, I said, oh, I have a small collection of those. I'll make sure that I will always hang those plates next to his painting, since his painting was inspired by the blue and white antique plates. Okay, here we have, I think, our single most beautiful Buddha. I purchased him actually in the Netherlands from one of the biggest collectors in the world. So he is here. We've got a light shining down on him. Underneath him, these bases I brought back from Venice. For the life of me, I can't figure out how we got them back without them breaking, but they're here, they're intact. These, the pair of monks, these are the Buddha's foremost disciples. They are almost always, and they both have names that are about this long, which I can't remember. They are almost always depicted kneeling like this with beautiful hand gestures. They have gorgeous faces with almost a slight smile. I think the reason I love antique Buddhas so much is they either have a very gentle smile on their face or they're staring off in a positive way towards bliss, because of course they are all aspiring towards bliss or nirvana. So these we brought back from Chiang Mai, Thailand, but they are originally from Burma. And finally, over here, again, one of our most treasured pieces. This comes from a temple in Cambodia, again, legally exported. Originally, there was no mirror in here. That was not its purpose. I took this to an artisan in Texas a number of years ago when we were living in that state, and I said, I want you to make me the most old-looking mirror you possibly can for this piece. And my goodness, what an incredible job he did. You look at this and you think that this is as old as this, and it's not. So this is a temple piece. This looks good wherever you put it, in any house, wherever you put it. This painting, very large, is by an American artist, a woman, Greek-American heritage, Heather Chandros. She now, I knew her in Maine, or met her in Maine, but she now has her studios in Europe. She's getting a lot of big commissions all over the continent. And beneath it is French antique, which was one of my very early purchases. I've owned it at least 35 years. It dates from sometime in the 1800s. And this is the fabric that you see on it now is only the second time in 35 years that it's been reupholstered. So again, very durable. Okay, so we are coming down to what we, for want of a better term, we call the lower living room. It is a big room. And we're not going to linger too awfully long here, but you do see we have a nice fireplace. This is a 2-story room, beautiful beams on the ceiling. When we bought the house, the ceiling was painted black. It was a big debate. should we put it white? So glad we did. This big sweep of plaster staircase is a really nice architectural feature of this room. And again, the archways in the interior windows above, the archway in this interior doorway. Our master carpenter made this for this spot. We used the top of an unattractive older built-in that we were able to give away, but the top is limestone with fossils in it. So this piece weighs a ton, and instead of having file cabinets and office stuff, this is where it all goes. This is where it all gets hidden. More of our coral collection, some more of our antique Buddhas. These are antiques from India, these deer, which are really fun. And above, I very much like this story. I do want to tell it. For years, I thought that this tray was either Egyptian or Syrian. And I recently had a fellow from Iran here in the house. He was delivering the handmade carpet from India that was in the hallway. And turns out that he was an antiquarian as well. He was not rug merchant alone. So he was going through the house, and he came downstairs, and he said, he goes, this is from my hometown. And I said, I thought you're Iranian. He goes, yes. He goes, this is from my hometown. It's from Isfahan. I said, I thought this was Egyptian. I was told it was Egyptian when I bought it. And he goes, young lady, he said, young lady, this is from my town. I know this. My grandfather and my great-grandfather made these trays. This is from Isfahan. I mean, I love stories like this. So I said very humbly, thank you, sir. Thank you for the information. This is from Isfahan. You do see some more of my antique textiles on the wall. This is from the Silk Route. The one over here is actually, if you know Middle Eastern textiles, you can look at this dress and you say that this is made in Bethlehem. And that is exactly right. I bought it in Bethlehem. It's made by Palestinian Arabs, Christian Arabs in Bethlehem. And again, a real expert, which I do not pretend to be, can look at that and immediately identify it as from Bethlehem. And I really admire people who have that kind of expertise. And here is a really fun and interesting piece. Let me just tell you that this is a 200-year-old door from a Mexican jailhouse. It weighs a ton. It weighs a ton. And this door takes you into a TV and reading room and a tasting room. A lot of people like the tasting room. Let's have a quick peek at it. This comes from an old Mexican ranch. This was the brand of the cattle ranch. Lovely old door. Floors are limestone, and this is where we keep my husband's fine spirits. We are not serious wine collectors. We don't pretend to be, but this room is kind of fun. Also kind of a pleasant room for reading. Oh, I wish the weather was cooperating just a little bit more for Homeworthy, but okay, so we're outside in the garden in the pool area, which it gets a lot of use, particularly when our grandkids are in town. We've got an outdoor kitchen here with every kind of, piece of equipment that we need. And then you go out to this swimming pool, which we totally refinished. We had to blast all of the old walls off the swimming pool and then resurface it. We've got a nice deep end. Our grandson loves to dive into the deep end. I would point out these incredible palm trees and the cacti, 2-story cacti, here and here, here and here. There are a total of 18 of these palms backing the pool. But then if we look back this way, you'll remember we were in the principal bedroom looking out in this direction. And here you see some of the vegetation that we've put in the garden here. We do have about 75 potted trees, plants, and shrubs around the exterior. Looking back at the house, you get a real sense of the architecture, which I find very pleasing. The clay roof tiles, and you know that in the old days, the clay roof tiles, you know how they were shaped? They're shaped like this. They were shaped over a woman's thigh. So that's how originally those clay roof tiles were shaped. This is a palm tree called the canary palm. It is kind of endangered in the sense that it is attractive to a certain weevil, and thousands of them have been lost here in Southern California, and specifically in Rancho Santa Fe. Terrible disease. We have ours treated every 3 months trying to fight off those nasty weevils. So we have a lot of sitting areas, which means you need a lot of outdoor furniture. My goodness, I was taken aback with how much outdoor furniture we use and need out here. Looking up in this direction, you see the terrace off the dining room, which we looked at from the inside of the dining room earlier. And this is the room that we were just in, the blue and white room, the so-called Moroccan room. Okay, I want to show you our side garden as well, because we've been working a lot on that. Great palm trees here. These grow like wild. Bougainvillea, not in full flush now, but the bougainvillea, honestly, when it's in full flush, it is just glorious, both orange and pink. And you round the corner here, and this is a side garden that we've been working a lot on. Now, on the fence, we planted this jasmine about 18 months ago. It's tripled in size in 18 months. You've missed the big peak of the jasmine. It will peak again in a few months, but probably by this time next year, the entire fence will be covered with jasmine. And I wish you were here to smell it, because even though it's not in its peak now, it still smells really good. We recently moved all of our iceberg roses inside the fence line because we have a lot of deer here in Rancho Santa Fe. These were all out in the front of the house where they're not protected by a fence, and the deer love rose buds. So we're trying to get these to come back in bloom. They should be fine. They transplant very readily, but they're not in bloom right now. Topiary roses, crepe myrtles coming back into bloom. Coming back into leaf, I should say, and then it will be in bloom. These are 3 different crepe myrtle trees, 3 different shades of pink and purple. Rosemary, I love the smell of rosemary. Oh my goodness, just terrific. You know, I mentioned the eucalyptus trees, and I mentioned the lemon groves being such a part of the history of Rancho Santa Fe. So one of the little things that I do is all the potpourri in our house is eucalyptus scented. So that's the smell of Southern California to me. And then lemon groves. So we have a lemon grove on this side of the house, on the other side of the fence, and we have a lemon grove on the other side of the house. And again, being from New England, I thought this was the coolest thing when we got out here. Then I quickly came to understand that you really have to take care of your lemon trees. So we have about 75 in total, which is probably 74 more than we need. But I can't bring myself to take the lemon groves out. Some of our neighbors are, because they do require work, but they are so much a part of Rancho Santa Fe history. I just can't make that choice. So anyway, this is our side garden, and I enjoy gardening, so I'm out here a lot. Also on the property, we have olive trees, we have pepper trees, we have eucalyptus. That's eucalyptus over there. And of course, we have a myriad number of palms. This is an example of one of the outdoor fireplaces. I mentioned that we have 14 fireplaces in all. This is, again, the Kiva style fireplace. This is absolutely usable. This is a wood fireplace. It just has a hole in the top for the smoke. Absolutely usable. And then I would take you up on the courtyard. Another courtyard. I mentioned that all of the main rooms on the house, every single one, and most of the bedrooms have their own courtyards. And here's one. This is off a guest suite, which we didn't have time to see, but it's also off the kitchen. So this courtyard is a very pleasant place to have lunch. Normally we have a pretty tablecloth on it, but again, it's a little damp today. I purposely left these pots empty. These are like sculpture to me. But we have this little lemon tree, which is in a pot. They don't really like to be in pots so very much, but he does fine. And this is a space on the house where we allowed these vines to grow because these are not sucker vines. I really wanted to be able to tell you that the garage and the guest house, the casita, were 100% covered with sucker vines, which are very destructive. They destroy the plaster. So we pulled all of the sucker vines, and my husband and I did a lot of this ourselves. We pulled all of the sucker vines off, replastered, sanded, repainted. I told you that the outside needed as much work as the inside, and it really did. But these we do leave. We leave the leaves because I find them beautiful, and we certainly have enough of exposure of the handsome stucco as well. So just another one of our courtyards. Okay, so this is the last part of the garden that I'm going to be showing you. We laid all of this hardscape, the stone, planted the crepe myrtles. These succulents I planted a year ago. They were this big a year ago. Take a look at them now. We've got various kinds of lilies and some other flowering plants and flax and succulents and so forth. And this is called Japanese sedge, this one. Anyway, we laid all this stone, as I said. That was a big job for a stonemason. It was fun, and we did that around the entire property. So, to summarize, we planted about 3,000 trees, shrubs, succulents, etc. But again, I want to emphasize that some of those things were this small, so 3,000 sounds like a lot. And we were very careful to only plant native plants that abound all over Rancho Santa Fe. Home means to me a shelter from the storm. I think the world is a stormy place, and we need a space where we can revive ourselves and be calm, be happy, and live with what you love.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to go to homeworthy.com for exclusive content, shopping guides, and so much more.